Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I'm Andy Barnett. I'd like to welcome you all to the February meeting of AHAC. I was going to say January because here we are on the first day of February, and I wasn't ready to make the change yet. I want to thank everyone for being here. I know most of us were involved in some way or another with the Affordable Housing Plan work over this end of last week and the weekend, and so to be here again and giving so much of your time and energy, thanks for all that you do. I had a dream last night about this meeting, and it just sort of like everything was going off the rails, and I woke up and I felt like Ebenezer Scrooge. I was like, it didn't happen. I have a chance to do it right this time. So we're going to try to do this meeting right today, and it's going to be like Christmas morning. We are the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. We're a 13-person committee, always 13 people, no matter how many I count when I count the membership. Our primary function is to advise the city's leadership on affordable housing policy issues and priorities for city funding. We work with the Housing and Community Development Committee at the City Council to forward our recommendations to the full City Council. All committee members and staff are now participating in person, and we're streaming live on the Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city website, and also linked on the committee page. You can also watch the meeting on the city's YouTube channel, either live or recorded. Public can listen to the meeting live by calling 855-925-2801 and then enter code 7663. We take public comment at the end of the meeting, and we will also accept public comment by email or voicemail made before 5 p.m. the day before the meeting. Before I take roll, I want to just briefly introduce our newest member of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, Alvarez Abernathy. Alvarez, we're glad to have you on the team. You want to just introduce yourself just a little bit? And you'll have to pull the mic around, get right
just
into
keep it within about an inch.
Good morning. My name is Alvarez Abernathy. I am from Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been here about 8 years. I'm currently the program director at ABTCM's Costello House. It's a transitional housing facility for men who have mental health and substance use issues. Currently also in grad school at Montreat working on a master's in mental health counseling. Love public, the government, love helping others. I've been on the ground level since I got here working with the homeless population and individuals with substance use and housing issues. Had a general contractor's license for a short period of time here in North Carolina. Worked with Keller Williams for a short while. Just glad to be here and glad to have the opportunity to learn as much as I can and be of service to the community.
Great, thank you. We're glad to have you here. Do the rest of our roll call here. Our Vice Chair, Brian Meffin, is unable to join us today. Scott Adams.
Present. Sorry, got me mid-notes.
David is helping somebody hopefully avoid eviction in court today, so he's not with us. Jane is not here as well. Chris Day.
Present.
Paul Heathman.
I'm here.
Tara Irby.
Present.
Rita Lee is not here with us. Babs Phillips is not here. And Noena Smith?
Present and ready.
All right. And Stuart, I saw you just walked in. All right.
Sorry.
All right. Very good. All right, let's get down to business. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes from our January meeting. Any discussion? Minutes. Take a motion to approve.
Make a motion?
In a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Whew. All right, we got that one out of the way. I'm really excited about our first speaker today. We've got a presentation from Jordan Mayhew and Shannon Boyd. They work at Asheville City and Buncombe County Schools respectively. With the McKinney-Vento program, McKinney-Vento was legislation to improve services to homeless students within schools. And I was telling them before the meeting, I feel like a lot of housing work goes on a little bit under the surface of things, but the work that happens with homeless students in our schools goes on even below that surface. It's really a spot that we don't take a look at nearly enough. And we've been wanting to bring them into this meeting for a while and excited to finally do that today. This work has a really unique perspective, I think, on affordable housing. It sort of sits at the that place between affordable housing and homeless services. And it doesn't land really exactly in any of those places because they use a different definition under the McKinney-Vento law than any other homeless services program that gives them a really unique look at some of the dimensions of housing instability that we don't typically see when we're simply looking at, the affordable housing side of things or the homeless services side of things. So I'm really excited to have them here for that perspective, and also to help us think about the connection between housing and education. I think you could probably, if you graphed the declining enrollment in Asheville City schools and the rise in home costs and the availability of 2+ bedroom rental units in our community, they probably are exactly inverse curves on that line. So we really have a lot to think about as we think about how our investments in education in our community and our investments in housing in our community fit together within the work that this community does. And so timely to have y'all here as we're thinking about the affordable housing plan and big picture stuff around housing in our community. So welcome. Come on up and tell us everything you know.
There it is. All right. Well, first I want to say thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate that. My name is Shannon Boyd. I'm the McKinney-Vento and Foster Care Coordinator for Buncombe County Schools.
I'm Jordan Mayu. I'm with Asheville City. We're the counterparts to each other. And yeah, thanks so much for everything you've said. It's refreshing to hear that there is acknowledgement of the work that we do, and we're appreciative to have this platform to speak with you and all the work that you all do too. Thank you.
Okay, all right, that sounds good. So basically, the McKinney-Vento Act is a federal law designed to increase the school enrollment, attendance, and success of children and youth who are experiencing homelessness. And the way I look at it is we want to remove barriers. We want to make sure that kids have stability. That's the most important thing about this McKinney-Vento Act.
So when we look at the definition, it's really lacking these three categories. So the term homeless children and youth means individuals who lack fixed, regular, or adequate nighttime residence. So we see that if they're doubled up, and we'll get into that a little bit more later, sometimes it's tripled up. We have several families in the same unit. Some of our families are staying in hotels, motels, campgrounds, emergency shelters. As you guys are well aware, a lot of times we can't even get them into the shelters because of the wait lists there. Cars, parks, public spacings, that we would basically say that they're unsheltered. And then we have some migratory youth in any of those circumstances. And then we'll go a lot more into detail of what unaccompanied youth experiencing homelessness means.
So the McKinney-Vento educational rights, the education of homeless children and youth entitles children experiencing homelessness to a free, appropriate public education and requires schools to remove barriers to their enrollment, attendance, and success in school. And so the goals are to be enrolled in school immediately. So even if a family, a child is lacking documents, when we think of enrolling a child. If you've enrolled a child, you know you have to have a birth certificate, you have to have proof of residency, you have to have immunization. And if a family is experiencing homelessness, we do not have to have those documents present. Now, that doesn't mean we won't work with them to get them, but that cannot be a barrier for enrollment. We would remove that barrier completely. So be enrolled in school and attend classes while the school gathers the necessary documentation, and then receive transportation to and from the school of origin. So school of origin is the school where the student is experiencing homelessness. So my child and myself, let's say we were evicted or there was domestic violence, then my child's attending Lester Elementary. And so the goal would be that we could stay in that school of origin, because that's the school where I was attending when the child became homeless. So transportation would be that we would provide transportation to wherever that child is now residing. So if they're staying in a motel, they're staying with a friend, a family, then we would provide transportation, even if it's outside of that school district. So continuing attending their school of origin, so the school in which they were last enrolled, if that is their preference, and also if it's in their best interest. It's not always in their best interest, but if that's what is preferred by the family, the student, then we try to make it happen. Receive educational services comparable to those provided to all other students according to the student's needs.
Okay, so unaccompanied homeless youth. This is any student not living in the physical custody of their parent or legal guardian. So these youth, we have different numbers for it, and it could be any age for the child. A lot of times we think of high school students that maybe ran away from home or were kicked out of their home, or just don't feel safe with whoever they were residing with and they leave home. But it really could be an elementary student who is residing with their uncle, and their uncle doesn't have any legal guardianship over them. So we do have pretty high numbers of these youth. And this is kind of a barrier for some of our students when we think about medical needs, mental and social emotional needs. So how can they consent for those items when they don't have a legal guardian who's able to sign those forms?
So Buncombe County Schools, this school year, we have 77 unaccompanied homeless youth that we have identified. Do you know your number?
I only have 12. Our enrollment numbers are a lot smaller than Buncombe County.
So how do we support McKinney-Vento students and families? So we do have an MOU with the Asheville Housing Authority, and we're able to do the supportive services preference, so that has been huge. Of course, that wait list is closed right now, and so we're working. Jordan and I have decided we need to figure out, we want to meet our new director of the Housing Authority. We haven't had a chance to do that, so that's on our list to do. And really continue that work that we've been able to do with the Housing Authority. So we've seen families come in, sit down, and we've helped them complete the application for housing, and then also do that supportive services preference, and then we've been able to help them move into their home. So that's been an experience for both of us. And so Asheville City has 2 middle school tutors that support their students that are experiencing homelessness, and then also a youth and transition coordinator for the high school. And that's really focusing on those unaccompanied homeless youth or those high school youth that are experiencing homelessness. So Buncombe County Schools, we have a high school tutor. We also just hired a student support specialist to do that same work, to really work with our unaccompanied youth in the Inca and Irwin district, because those are our highest numbers of students that are experiencing homelessness in our high schools. And then Buncombe County Schools, we have the Buncombe County Schools Family Resource Center, so I also direct that resource center, and we have 2 homeless service resource specialists that focus on the needs of homeless families. And then we also have delivery drivers, so we're able to provide food, clothing, just basic hygiene, laundry, detergent, diapers, wipes, and we work with all of our community partners to provide those services. We all know if your basic needs are not met, you're not able to learn. So that's the goal of the Resource Center, is to remove those barriers for families. We provide case management with families experiencing homelessness, so that's doing an intake, looking at, when did you start living in this homeless situation, and how did you get there, and then how can we help move you out of that? And so that's a huge goal for us, is to make sure these families, while they're in this situation, let's help you get out of that situation. And so, yet again, we do provide the food bags and the diapers, wipes, hygiene, laundry, detergent kits, cleaning supplies, school supplies. They can leave the Resource Center with all of those needs. So not having to go out in the community and go to 5 different places to get things that they need, especially when they don't have transportation. A lot of our families don't have transportation, and so that's a huge barrier, transportation and childcare. And then also collaborating and coordinating resources and trainings with local agencies, and that's huge for us. We collaborate with a lot of our agencies in Buncombe County. So Buncombe County Schools, so this is some data from last school year. So last year we identified 714 students that were experiencing homelessness, and 79 of those students were unaccompanied homeless youth. And then the birth to 5, we identified 50. We know that number is higher, and that's a goal for Jordan and I this school year, is to really focus on that birth to 5 and making sure that we're identifying them as well. And so just some numbers broken down. Really looking at that doubled up, that is our highest number of homeless students. Last year, we really saw an increase in not just doubled up, but tripled up. The numbers, we have a family living in a single wide, 12 people living in that single wide. And so we're seeing an increase in that. A lot of our Latinx families, we do see that. And then unsheltered, it's all broken down there. So I'll leave that up for just a minute so you can see that.
And this is Asheville City Schools data from last year. So we identified a total of 176 students, and then 21 of them were unaccompanied youth experiencing homelessness, and 15 were ages 0 to 5. So you can see we have similar data on the doubled up population. Typically, that's about 80% of our students. And honestly, that's kind of ideal. They're not on the street, they are somewhere with shelter. And so if that number is higher, that's a win for us. We want to see all of our students just having stability. So if they can be doubled or tripled up, that's better than unsheltered, in our opinion. And you can see the race broken down into different categories as well. And then this year so far, we've identified 166 students. And Asheville City and Buncombe County, we're definitely identifying more this year. So, we're only 10 away from last year's total number. I think that's partly due, I joined Asheville City in November, so there was a little gap where the position was vacant. But also, it's just building awareness. So we've done a lot more presentations in the community. We've talked to our schools and trained them more intensely, just so that we can look for some of those warning signs. If a student is coming and they're wearing the same clothes every day, or there's hygiene concerns, or they're missing a lot of school because of transportation barriers. So when we're able to do those training for our admin and our teachers, then we can increase our numbers and raise that awareness.
And this year, we've identified 489 students so far. So these are some challenges that, of course, we both face as the homeless liaison. So the number of identified, of course, students are increasing. And so last year, our number was higher. We had over about 100 refugees that had come from Ukraine. So that was a huge part of that number last year. So, and of course, identification challenges. And just like she said, our goal is to make sure that our staff are trained and they know what to look for. And then just making sure that they're identifying those students. And then, of course, our unaccompanied homeless youth numbers are increasing. And then families are tripled and quadrupled up. So lack of childcare and transportation, And then, of course, the wait list is closed, so we're waiting for that to open back up. And then, of course, just gaps in those resources, such as immediate housing options. A lot of them have some back rent owed, large utility bills, and then, of course, just shelter guidelines. And that is, a lot of our families can't stay together in some of our shelters. And then, of course, those wait lists for shelters. It's hard to get our families in. All right, so any questions?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Shannon, I don't even know if you remember me, but I worked at Help Me for a while doing some housing programs, and you helped me to save a lot of families' lives, and I just want to thank you for that. And also just to give a personal testimony, because of the McKinley-Vento Act, it helped me personally get childcare for my family. Childcare is hard to get in Asheville, and if you don't know someone or know how to work the system, you can't get it. So they sent me home with I filled out the application, they told me it's gonna be a 2-year wait, but they sent me home with some information about the McKinley-Vento Act, and thank God I know how to read. So I read, and I called back, and I said, well, according to this document you gave me, the McKinley-Vento Act says that you have to give me a child care voucher so I can get child care. Oh, can you come back tomorrow morning? Yes, at 9 o'clock? Yes, I'll be there. But that's not for everyone, So when I was working at Help Me, I would tell my clients, make sure when you go in for your child care vouchers, you say because of the McKinley-Vento Act, and you don't know how many doors that has opened up for people in the community, for housing, for child care. So I thank you for doing the work you're doing, because I've seen it in action, and I thank you very much for your work.
Thank you.
But I have a question. How does this affect charter schools? Because we have Asheville Peak Academy right now, who has housed a lot of families who are hurting right now.
Yeah.
Are they benefiting from the McKinley-Vento Act? Because those families need some help.
Yeah. So just recently, so the last couple of years, we've really seen that increase where charter schools are also required as well to have a homeless liaison. So even in our statewide meetings, we're meeting with charter schools are present as well.
Okay.
So yes.
All right, thank you.
I will say a lot of times charter schools, it's smaller and there's not as much staff. So that liaison is probably the school social worker as well. We're fortunate enough to have our own positions and can dedicate all of our time to this. So they're strapped a little more thin. But it's a national program, so every school has to have someone designated who is advocating for these students.
Could there be like a consultant in the area that could help if the school doesn't have a point person? Could that?
Well, it's a law, so every school should have a designated person as the homeless liaison. And like she said, it could be the school social worker, we see assistant superintendents, we see student services directors. So yeah, everybody is stretched thin. So, but everybody is doing the same work we're doing. Like she said, we're just fortunate that we get to do it as our only job. So, well, I shouldn't say only. We do lots of things, yeah. The one thing with charter schools too is that's the other part of our job is to collaborate with those charter schools, that they can reach out to us, and we've seen that. So they'll connect with us and say, hey, I have this family, what should I do? So, and that's just building those relationships with them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In your experience, are there roadblocks that you find in the city, that policy changes that this board could recommend could make things easier in what you do?
There's a lot of barriers. I think just the shelters not having as much capacity has been something we've ran into for the past several years. I will say Safe Shelter has been a huge resource for us just recently because they have family rooms. So that's something, if we had a single dad with 3 kids, there was nowhere for us to send him or refer him to. So that's been really helpful to keep families intact. And then really, we just see the ripple effects for that for the students. They don't have to choose between a parent, or they can keep their animal with them. So that's been a really big asset that we've been able to tap into this year. I do believe they only have 3 family rooms. So that's still a challenge because we have a lot more than 3 families that need that space.
We also have a lot of families living in a motel hotel, and they're paying $500-600 a week. And a lot of them have the evictions, the credit scores that are very low, can't get into any kind of housing. So don't know what kind of policy could work with them. You know, we try to work with them even through On Track Financial. Let's work to get your credit score built up. You know, let's do some of that work, but that takes time. And so they're spending all of the money that they have, barely getting by living in these, you know, hotels and motels. We're thankful for our local hotels and motels for allowing them to stay and then allowing us to maybe pay for a week. We do have some funding that we can pay for a week for some of our families. And so where they're not sleeping in their car, or where they can get in somewhere and take a shower, or just sleep in a good, comfortable bed for the night. So another thing for us is our unaccompanied youth. There's nowhere for them to go with Trinity Place when that closed. There is no kind of even like a drop-in shelter for youth. So there's nowhere for them to go to get, I mean, we provide as much wraparound services as we can, but when they go home, or wherever they're going, if they're couch surfing or living in their car, and we do have youth that are living in their car or a van, there's nothing for them once they leave the school. And so having a place for them to be able to lay their head, to maybe receive some kind of mentoring, some tutoring, some life skills. Kids don't know how to, you know, get a birth certificate or get a Social Security. That's something that we work diligently to provide that for them and try to make sure when they do graduate, they have skills to move into adulthood. So just a place for them is super important to us.
I think perhaps part of your jobs also involve foster care. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So we both, of course, are the foster care point of contact. And so before 2015, December of 2015, foster care students resided under McKinney-Vento law. And then in 2015, they removed foster care and put it in its own under Every Student Succeeds Act. So meaning that foster care students basically, they mimic the same thing that McKinney-Vento does, but they're under their own umbrella now. And so now not only does a school have to provide a homeless liaison, but you have to provide a foster care point of contact. And so luckily, Jordan and I, we get to be that position as well. And so we work with our local DHHS, who are amazing to work with, and making sure that kids that are in foster care are yet again provided the same school stability that homeless students are. So making sure that if they're taken into foster care, that they can remain in their school of origin, that if the school of origin is outside their district, that we are providing that transportation back to that school of origin. Also, just making sure they're enrolled immediately if they are not going to remain in their school of origin or they're coming from out of county. So those goals is, yet again, school stability is our #1 priority for those students. And most of those kids, that school of origin is really that, it's their safe place. You know, they don't want to leave their school. They don't want to leave their friends. They don't want to leave the people that they know. And so we work really hard to make that happen.
So you had mentioned a couple of things. One, you were talking about the casework services that you provide and sort of understanding the precipitating events that led to students becoming homeless. What do you see as sort of the major trends there? You know, what, to Chris's point, sort of what can we do upstream to make sure that families have housing stability so that they, you know, you're not seeing these kids. We can slow down this growth in numbers.
One of the things, rent increase. So, and that, this year, last year and this year, we have seen not only families who maybe have been living in homelessness for a number of years, or but they're new to this. They've never experienced that, but you're seeing that rent increase. We've seen staff with Buncombe County Schools that are not able to afford rent. And so having to move out because they can't afford that. So evictions, of course, not making good decisions, of course, and then domestic violence is another one. So I'll let you share with that. Yeah.
So one of the things that we've spent a lot of time talking about on this committee is the mix in sizes of units that we're thinking about incentivizing a particular housing development. The need for units geared towards single individuals, which makes up a large number of the overall housing need as it's been assessed in our community. But also knowing sort of anecdotally the stories like you're talking about where folks are, where families are experiencing housing instability. So what do you see, kind of what would be among the families that you're serving, what sort of housing size, do you have a sense of sort of the family size of these families?
There's always a longer wait list for 4-bedroom units, and I would say a lot of our families are sibling groups. So there's multiple kids in there, and our families are so grateful and appreciative of help that they're willing to put 3 kids in a bedroom, and they'll take that 2-bedroom, to get off the street. That's okay. But the larger unit size would be ideal for them long term.
I have a family of 9 right now living in a motel, and they've been there for 2 years because of that, because they can't, even calling landlords or calling these places, they're like, well, what's the size? Well, you're not going to lie. I'm not going to lie. I can't. But I'm like, okay, it's a family of 9, 7 kids and 2 adults. And because of the septic, okay, we can't take them. So, and then that wait list for those larger units. We don't see that often, but that size, but we see a lot with 5 kids. We have a lot of those. Just got a referral yesterday with 6 kids. So
I think we talk a lot about like a survival mentality. If they're in a hotel, they're just trying to make that payment that week. So they can't focus on saving for a security deposit down the road. And these families are fighters, but they really have to prioritize, am I going to be able to feed my child tonight? Not long-term, can I buy a house? Like, they're not even thinking that far in advance right now. So I applaud our families for everything they're doing just to get through the day, and that's where we try to come in. Like Shannon said, a lot of our job is about access of, okay, there are these barriers, or maybe you don't know about these resources, and we do. So how can we help bridge you to those community supports?
and the hard part is when I had transported the family of 9, the 7, there are 5 kids in school, and I transported them, and can you help us get a house? And, what do you say to that? So, and that's what they want more than anything, is that for Christmas, that's what they wanted, was a house. So, wished I could have provided it, but I couldn't.
Speaking of which, I know there was a point in time where affordability and accessibility was an issue for Buncombe County school teachers. And there was development that was done in order to accommodate that in a way. And I don't know that it addressed the larger issue, but I wonder where that funding came from, and if there's anything out there for funding for to be able to build emergency shelters or to be able to address that need through monies that we can get through the school system itself.
Yeah, we do have, the units that are for Asheville City and Buncombe County. There is a long wait list for that as well. So, and I don't know where that funding came from. I'm sure it was a donor. I'm not really sure, but we talked about that even in the meeting that I attended the other day, how not only educators, but we were talking about just people in certain positions, your firefighters, your officers of, deputies and all of them that can't afford that type of housing either. So we need more of that for sure, yeah.
You need a magic wand.
Yeah. We do have some, and we didn't share with you, but we do have some really good, we've seen some good outcomes. Don't want you to be so, it's very, sometimes this work is very depressing, and it's very, but it's also very rewarding because we have seen our families who have come in, who have been able to secure housing, and we've been able to work with them through that whole process. And so because of the MOU, because of that supportive services and doing some of those things with the Housing Authority, and not even just through the Housing Authority, but also through doing the low and the income and the affordable income housing. So, but it's taken them on their part to really work at that, go around and apply to everyone that they can. So we have seen some successes, and we've seen families that who never thought they would get to live in a home again, who are there now. And so we appreciate those small successes. And so
I do want to touch on too, with the MOU with the Housing Authority, to get on the supportive preferences wait list, they do have to agree to have case management services for a year after they obtain housing. So a lot of our focus, we can continue to work with that family even when they get housing. So that way we make sure that they stay in housing, and that's the long-term goal.
And I wonder how your capacity to do so. If you were a two-woman show, how do you provide that case management that we require? I'm the COO at Asheville Housing Authority, by the way. That we require to be able to help facilitate a successful placement in successful housing.
We have great teams. It's not just us.
Okay.
We have, and we work very closely with the school social workers who see the kids every day. And then we had on our slide some of our different supports. So I have a high school part-time employee that works very closely with our students, the tutors and everything as well. So it's not just us.
yeah, and that's the same for us as well. With our resource center, we have 7 staff members and just hired our 8th. So it's a team effort, and so couldn't do it without them.
Because it requires a lot, and it's intensive case management, and it is our expectation, and so we want to make sure that you all have the capacity to do so.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
One more question for me. What about language access? I've been in a lot of meetings lately, and in my current role, I'm a representative of equity and inclusion for Buncombe County, and some of our brown people are saying that there's not translators at meetings. Some documents are not being translated, and they feel excluded. So how are we making sure that whoever is in our community who needs translation or need assistance is getting it? And maybe B, inclusion, culturally inclusion, because right now we know that some of our professionals, not to say are white, but how are we making sure that we are providing services? Because from your document, the homeless for Buncombe County, I've seen Buncombe County was more white, and then Asheville was more black. And so I'm just trying to see how we're making sure that we are reaching, supporting those cultures.
Our documentation should be translated. We post flyers throughout the community that has English and Spanish, but then we also have interpreters that we contract with for the school. So our student services department, if there's a family that doesn't speak English and I can't, accommodate their needs, then we'll work with our translator as well.
Yeah. We also have a school social worker that works specifically with our Latinx students as well. And then, of course, all of our documents, that is a requirement for the schools that anything that needs to be translated would be translated in whatever language. So, yeah.
I had a quick question. So this may be a completely naive question, but I'll ask it just to have it asked out and open. So community-wide, there's a big discussion around short-term rentals. In any instances of trying to provide sort of bridge housing, have you all been able to utilize that in any way, or is that basically it's a parallel higher price system of sorts?
We've had a couple of families that are identified as McKinney-Vento who have been using some short-term rentals, Airbnbs. So I know one is actually even out of county, so in McDowell County, because it was cheaper.
Sure.
So,
Thank you.
Well, thank y'all so much. This is brave and compassionate work that you do, so appreciate you doing it, and thanks for sharing with us this morning.
yeah. And this is our contact information, so if anyone has any questions anytime, please feel free to reach out. Sasha has our emails as well.
And if you, can you share this presentation?
I would be
with me?
happy
I'll
to,
put it in a
yeah.
folder so people can.
Okay, I'll email that. Thank you guys again. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
All right, we're going to move on to a little bit of a discussion of our committee work plan for the coming year. We started talking about this last month. I'd like to get this sort of nailed down today so that we can stop talking about getting to work and start getting to work. And I'm going to just kind of tick through a few things that are on our work plan that are already identified, and then we'll think about really how we want to structure our committee and our work groups for around the work plan. So the first thing that was on our work plan, and it's the thing that this committee is most clearly chartered to do, is the creation and implementation of our affordable housing plan. So for Alvarez's benefit, we're in the middle of a process to update an affordable housing plan that hasn't been updated since 2008, and so we're in the throes of making a new plan for the city of Asheville to work from. And I think I want to start there and just say I think almost everybody on the team was able to participate in some of the discussions that happened when our consultants on the plan from Enterprise were in town this past weekend. So I'd love just to get, it was not an official meeting, so we couldn't really talk about it when we were in the room together. So I wanted to, now in an official capacity, give us a time to, for you to, any thoughts or reflections that you have from the time that we were able to spend with our.
And maybe summarize for a few people who weren't there too.
Okay.
Yeah. If anyone wants to try to.
All right, if somebody wants to try to summarize what they heard, or just a little background, and I can fill in whatever blanks are left.
So my quick recollection, or we had sort of, two large questions posed to us. I think the first one was, what would success look like 10 years from now, kind of different metrics or indicators, and I can't recall the second question now, but basically, I felt like it was a good sort of wide-ranging discussion from a lot of different viewpoints, and it's the affordable housing is the ultimate sticky wicket problem. A lot of different angles. Paul Heathman, our resident banker, had a really good, quick discussion on down payment assistance and what that number is in the greater Asheville-Buncombe housing market. It's a lot higher than I think anyone's really comfortable or happy with, but that was just a good discussion point. And both myself and Chris Day, I think, were definitely speaking from a planning and zoning and design professional background, and sort of, trying to discuss sort of nuts and bolts that can, help or hinder housing production from a housing supply side. So I think that's, worthy of being part of the conversation. Trying to think of other points that came up. Let anyone else that was there chime in.
And I just added the presentation that I sent out yesterday. I just added it to your folder, so it's right there on your laptops if you want.
Thank you.
So while our consultants were here, many of you participated in the discussion that Scott was just referencing with kind of most of the people who are on housing and housing-adjacent boards and commissions. Folks from Reparations Commission were there, Planning and Zoning was there, a lot of folks from AHAC were in that conversation. They met with housing developers and kind of the real estate side of things, as well as anchor institution folks, banks and major employers in a similar forum. Before that, some meetings with civic leaders, elected officials, several resident focus groups. I know Poder Emma.
Nonprofits, and we had a nonprofit
Yeah.
session too. David came to that.
Yeah. So some resident focus groups, and then the 2 open houses that happened on Saturday that I know were well attended. So any other thoughts? Anybody participate in some other part of this other than the meeting that Scott was summarizing? You want to give us just an upshot of the Saturday things or some of the forums that we weren't involved in?
Sure, so we were at the Shiloh Community Center on Saturday morning from 10 to 12:30. We had an initial rush at the beginning, so clearly some people planning to be there, and then it kind of slowed down. Hunter did some good pulling from the basketball game across the hall. We got some folks, just some families who were there, which was great. And so it wasn't as well attended as we hoped, but some of the leaders of the Shiloh Community Association showed up. They had done a robocall for their whole community for us and kind of tried to push it as hard as they could. And WLS was there in the morning as well. And then we were at the mall from 2 to 5, and it was very successful. It was a rainy afternoon. People seemed to have time on their hands. And then, but also some people really pushed it out. I think maybe Lexi Aaron, who's here with Disability Partners, pushed it out. Jen Hampton with Just Economics and the food and beverage workers pushed it out. So we had some people who came on purpose and were there to talk. And it was really busy until probably like 4:30, I would say. It started to slow down. But so it was great. I was a doubter about the mall, but I was proved wrong.
Question. Just because I'm new, what kind of information was shared at those?
Sure, so there was a series of boards with questions, so it's really like getting folks' input on, and you can add if I forget something, but kind of when you think of housing, what do you think about in our community? What's your vision for the future? There was even like a collage activity, which not everybody's into, but some people love that kind of stuff. Then there was 2 boards for renters and 2 boards for homeowners. And the first one was, where do you live, and also, and would you stay? Like, if you're picking where you want to stay, you could be anywhere in Buncombe County, city, Buncombe County. Where would you want to be? So, and then if you wanted to move, where would you want to move to? And there were some other things, but that's kind of eliciting and I think there's also some questions around what's the biggest need, what else am I forgetting? Or can you think of anything?
Yeah, and so in one way that they sort of started to evaluate these questions is they did a SOAR analysis, and there were 2 boards that did that, and that was where there were questions about what are sort of Asheville's strengths, what are some of the opportunities, what are those aspirations that we have, and then what are the results that you want to see. And this is all framed around housing and affordable housing and what that might mean or look like to different people in different groups. And so that was sort of how they framed the discussion, and that was some of the boards and exercises that they had available at these events. And so what it actually looked like was just trifolds. And in the mall, there was just a line of trifolds that you could either walk down linearly and complete them all, or you could jump in at individual ones as time permitted. I hope that helps.
So what did we find out that we didn't know?
I was really surprised to hear someone, when they decided if they could live anywhere in Asheville, they said south. They really just liked how pretty it looked, and that they were available to things, and that it was busy. Equally, this was, I think, a high schooler. So, take their taste with a grain of salt.
I think we haven't done all the data analysis yet. I guess that's what I would say. We don't know what we don't yet. But it's, all of that will really help us kind of center this plan and real experiences and not just an academic kind of exercise.
And people definitely had two similar feelings for both our strengths and the results that they wanted. They found that the strength was that Asheville's beautiful and a great place to live. And that's something that we all love and want to maintain. And I think the main result that people wanted was more housing across the spectrum. I don't think that was necessarily clear. Like there's like a lot of opinions around like what that looks like, and then some nuance there, but that was the general tone.
Yeah, I would say in the two conversations that I was able to be a part of on Friday, the thing that struck me was, Tara, to your question, what do we know that we didn't already know? I think I feel like I heard people kind of reimagining what this conversation could be about. So I think a lot of times we get locked into the, either the policy tools that we already have or, kind of the production-oriented side of the conversation. And it really seemed like people were willing to think about this conversation of affordable housing in the context of what our local identity is, who we want it to be. So, are we a more urbanizing sort of community going forward? Are we a less tourism-dependent community? Kind of how do we broaden how we think about who we are as a city in order to think about who, what our housing picture looks like and who gets to be a part of this community because, they have a place to live here. So that to me was the really refreshing part of this conversation. And again, we don't have all of the data analysis to think about what that specifically looks like. That's the next step of this planning process. But to start with with some fresh ideas and a way to reimagine the conversation seemed really hopeful to me.
I'll add one quick note that I took. I mean, yeah, there was kind of a couple of different iterations on, are we a small town? Are we a city? Are we a growing city? How do we grow that, allows more people to, well, how do we grow in a way that allows, people that are already here, i.e. they're homeless, they're doubling up, they're housing stress, to get, more and better quality housing. And then also, thinking about the future. And Dee Williams, who was there representing the Reparations Commission, she had a really succinct, pithy quote. She said, "Look at the numbers, not the nostalgia," which I thought was a very, quick sort of bracing look at how to look at all the numbers that we're looking at related to housing, both in the present and going forward into the future. So.
Any other thoughts on the housing plan and the visit that we had from our consultants? So going forward, we have, again, getting this housing plan birthed is, probably the single biggest piece that the committee's doing this year. Nuena and I are involved in with the community engagement roundtable that our plan consultants are using to try to gather and synthesize the input that they've found from the conversations that they've had with community members. Obviously, that is a part of what's going on. That's one way that this committee continues to be connected to the plan, as well as we'll have regular conversations with the consultants from Enterprise when they're in town. And the next one of those is coming up at the end of February. I'm going to get all the
Your
dates wrong.
roundtable meeting?
No, the next time they're here, where we're trying to set up a meeting with this group.
No,
Okay.
they'll be coming like
Straighten
one of the
me out.
last 2 weeks of March.
Okay, thank you.
So before spring break in the schools, we're sensitive to that.
Yeah, so we're trying to make sure I don't talk out of turn. We're trying to make sure that the next time they're that our consultants are here, that we sync that up with an AHAC meeting so that we don't have what we had this last time where, they were here on Friday, we're meeting again the next week. We can't, it's not an actual meeting, so we can't do that work. So we may be rearranging our meeting time and their travel time for our March meeting so that we are
Right,
able to
yeah,
accommodate.
your regular meeting the first week of April is during spring break, which doesn't necessarily affect all of you, I don't know, but it does affect people, so, in general, so, it might be moving that meeting back, or combining March, April, I don't know, but.
Yeah. And then we should be having some findings from the work that they did when they were here this time around and the data analysis piece that they shared with us briefly on Friday. That's coming sometime before their March
Right.
meeting.
Yes, and they will, for the March, they will have kind of a framework, an outline of what the plan's gonna look like, and a set of draft recommendations to get feedback on. Like, this is, here's what we heard, here's what we know from data, here's what we're recommending, how does that sit, and what people's reactions are to that. It won't be it may not be every single one, maybe, but I think hopefully, the majority of the meat of to get reaction.
So one of my questions to you all is, how do we want to proceed with, obviously we've got a few points of connection with this process and the consultants who are working on it. We'll get input as a large group, but do we want to identify some folks who can maybe go a little bit deeper when these recommendations come back, and really spend some time preparing feedback that we would give to our consultants on that as a work group from this committee, or do we want to just do that as a full committee in our March meeting and that? So just thoughts on how best to.
Yeah, I think our Build and Connect framework probably applies here with development. We'll have different categories of recommendations. So, and I am not a specialist in all of those sort of areas, so I can see where we can break up into groups and do the work. I mean, I think in the past it's definitely been powerful for us to have our connect and build groups. So yeah, definitely working groups. Maybe it's new ones. Maybe it's not build and connect. Maybe it's brand new. But
Yeah, and I think that's really the question. Does it make sense to have a group working on just looking at the plan findings and their the recommendations, the framework that they present to us in March, and preparing feedback in general, or does it make sense to take it through our two existing work groups and let the folks who have build expertise look at the development kind of policy strategies that they're suggesting, and the Connect work group look at sort of the people side of the strategies they're suggesting. Chris?
How does the time frame work out in terms?
That's what I was just about to say. So it's not like you're going to have a month to
Right.
sit on it. So
Right.
It's a fairly quick turnaround.
Yeah,
for
I mean,
feedback.
But it would be,
I'm
Which,
not
all the more
I'm not-
reason
yeah.
that I think
Yeah.
trying to divide and conquer with people who, we all have different backgrounds here.
Mm-hmm.
I have nothing when it relates to finance and policy, but when any recommendations about technical aspects of the ordinances, I'm happy to jump in on that type of stuff.
can we maybe give the consultants our two groups and ask them to recommend the team, since we don't have much time?
yeah, and my point in bringing this up is around that time sensitiveness, because we're not going to get, seeing their recommendations and discussing it in real time in a meeting where we haven't had a chance to digest it feels too short. Waiting for it to have that conversation across 2 meetings doesn't keep us to our timeline of getting the plan approved. So I want to find a way for us to, be able to digest it and talk to each other about what we're seeing in that. And then,
Personally, I'm happy to participate in a working group outside of this meeting to help facilitate that aspect on the technical side of things that I'm.
Might it make more sense, since it's a short-term and time-sensitive approach, just to sort of form an ad hoc committee to, be responsive and report back to this committee on, what's going on with the affordable housing plan, communicate with Enterprise directly, and then we would need expertise, I think, from both sides on that committee. But rather than have, two separate things who are also talking about other work that they're doing maybe this year, and then that just seems like it might be more efficient, especially since it's really over the next 6 months where it's needed, that we maybe just form a committee that has, expertise from several different areas to report to this committee on what's going on.
it would be a working group.
A working group, excuse me, yes, of course. That's a question for the committee. I don't know. I'm not serving on either of those, but I would be willing to get involved a little bit over the next 6 months if y'all wanted me to.
Just to add to some of what was said before, perhaps if the consultants could provide us with, 3 or 4 themes that they're seeing, then we as a group can say, okay, we need 3 or 4 working groups of 3 each, whatever, to, so we're prepared. Then when we get the information, we can sit and based on the theme, attack it that way. Because, we were talking build and connect, but what if there's, another area that requires attention or review?
With those working groups, I think we can also pull outside of the committee too, right?
Okay, so we have a few different ways that some sort of smaller group looking at the, what we see back from the consultants, but I'm hearing a general consensus that in some configuration, some smaller group of us looking at this in more detail before we have to, digest and give input back to the consultants in a formal committee setting. Seems like there's general consensus around that. So we'll move forward with identifying that. If you are, can folks who feel like they have the available time and interest in going a little bit deeper on the plan in some sort of working group configuration, whatever that might look like, if you can just let me know by email offline of this meeting, so that we can track that, and then we'll put that back out to folks. Okay, so that's kind of the next steps around the housing plan. The other big thing that is on our work plan was the discussion that we started last month when we had our presentation on the missing middle housing study. Scott Adams has been our representative on that up to this point, and they continue to meet with a smaller task force implementation team, whatever they're calling themselves, around what the missing middle study looks like. Scott, you want to give us just an update on anything that's happened with that since the last time we met?
Sure. So the working term of art we have right now is small implementation team. We've set up a standing meeting for Thursdays from 2 to 3:30. We're recording those. Those are being posted to the study website, as are the slide decks. I'm actually just glancing at the study site right now, and basically we're kind of going through possible implementation steps from the study. We're, I believe, scheduled to go to the Planning and Economic Development Committee of City Council in March to give some initial recommendations. Regarding I guess I'll just jump right into, kind of some specific questions that have come up. So it was both a missing middle housing study and an anti-displacement study, and I'll just quickly summarize. So the anti-displacement strategies, there were 14 strategies identified, anything from manufactured housing community preservation zones to sort of non-planning and zoning things. And I think a question that's come up, and I'll be glad to raise this afternoon with city staff and with the small committee, but basically the question about, what's an easier way to break up and digest some of these anti-displacement strategies. Again, I'll note that there were 14 proposed. 6 of them, just did a quick list to myself, I would call sort of bread and butter planning and zoning type things. I'll just give you a couple of quick examples. So approval process for affordable housing, allow duplexes, subdivision, minimum density standards, sliding scale FAR program, that's floor area ratio for the planning nerds. Those are 6 quick grabs that I would see that our small group would probably have both the capacity and the focus to go in on. In terms of the remaining 8, which I don't have that list in front of me, that might be something that I think possibly the Connect group could possibly have a role in discussing. Also, just to give you a kind of a quick flavor of the existing anti-displacement strategies identified in the study that the city and partners have, ranging from community land trusts, city-owned land, fee rebate program, housing trust fund, LUIG, et cetera. I know those, I think we'll maybe have a brief discussion of those 2 programs at our update just in a moment. But yeah, just long story short, we've got the small implementation group. Again, sort of, 6 out of the 14 displacement strategies, I think we could definitely keep more of a focus on. Obviously, it's all, it's all part of a system, but just in terms of trying to prioritize, I think those 6 out of the 14 for our small group within that framework could work.
And I did, at Andy's request, I did put the whole report in your folder, and the strategies that Scott is talking about are on page 138 and 139.
Mm-hmm.
And I can pull them up on the screen if you want. Just so you know, those are there for you to look at. So they're near the end of the report.
So since the connecting this missing middle housing implementation with affordability was another thing that we had talked about as a work plan goal for this committee. I'm trying to keep us in our work plan, but out of other people's lanes. So we've got this, small implementation team that are working on more of the zoning side of the missing middle. To Scott's point, there's about 8 of these anti-displacement strategies that are primarily not land use oriented and not existing programs. So those would be things like expanded eviction protection, foreclosure prevention assistance, right to return policies, those kinds of things that are really more sort of how do we keep people connected with their housing rather than how do we change the way we're building housing on the landscape, but how do people tie into that? So my suggestion is that we kind of further define the work plan item for AHAC around the missing middle housing study to really be the place where we dig into those, the anti-displacement strategies that are likely to, maybe not land cleanly in the work that, the planning team and the small implementation team on missing middle is going to work on. So my thought is that potentially that work of kind of looking at those, looking at our existing anti-displacement tools and making sure that we're fully applying those toward anti-displacement outcomes, and then looking at some of these new anti-displacement strategies and making sure that we test the feasibility of those and start figuring out where those might live and how the city might support them. it could be a focus for our work and possibly lives with the existing Connect work group, or is possibly a new work group that's focused just on that. Again, do we want to like try to shoehorn this into our existing work group structure, or redefine our work groups around the task? Either one makes sense to me. But how do folks? So, two questions. Do you think this feels like the right lane for AHAC as it relates to the missing middle housing work? And two, do you think it feels like something that we should put together a smaller team to work on, or address, in our monthly meetings?
Anti-displacement strategy seems like a good line.
Okay.
And just to give you the staff perspective, I think part of what you all can help us with is when the plan recommendations come out, that's where these, that's where we'll be looking, that's where these kind of dovetail together, hopefully, right? The tricky part is when you look at this list of things, not all of them, but many of them equal money, right? So to do any of these well, it's about funding, or partly about funding and capacity. Those are our two biggest things. So, and then, hopefully this plan is giving us a priority list for a bond in the fall, right? So that's where these come in. So you all can help us. I just want to keep framing it in terms of the plan and our future list, but you all can help us think that through.
Right, but I mean, as we think about funding strategies, obviously, most of our existing funding strategies are production-based strategies. The bond is going to be production-based strategies if we decide to move forward with a bond. Finding ways to carve out funding for these non-production-based anti-displacement strategies really becomes kind of a critical step for us, and it feels like a place where we are more likely to get resources, allocated, or flexible resources directed toward these kinds of things if we as a committee, back that as an important investment. So that, yes, I mean, it all does come down to resources, but that's, many of these things could be funded through, through CDBG funded programs, or in some of like tenant eviction prevention services. I mean, those are things that housing services dollars could go to, but we would need to be choosing that over some other use. So. Okay, I'm taking silence.
I'll just quickly note that, the phrase I was kind of toying with in my head is, Connect 2.0, if you're, needing, if you're wanting to, take, if you're wanting to get specific and say, okay, there's these 8 remaining, or categorize 8 anti-displacement strategies that are not overtly planning, zoning, nuts and bolts standards or processes, but it's more of a, higher level policy. I think that could be a useful conversation for Connect 2.0 to have.
Okay. I like that, Connect 2.0. So for the very short term, we've got other things in our work plan that we'll pick up later in the year, things around city-owned land disposition policy, providing some guidance around that came up as a topic that HCD was likely to take up this year, that staff's looking at this year, that ultimately we may need to provide some input on. That feels like it's a little bit later on, and I'd like to keep our focus on these two things on the plan and the missing middle study that seem to have some momentum right now. When I look in general at the work of AHAC over the course of this year, the word that keeps jumping out to me is synthesis. We've got the housing plan, we've got the missing middle study, we've got these anti-displacement strategies, that piece of the missing middle study. We've got some great recommendations surfacing through the reparations IFA around housing. Like, I feel like AHAC this year, the best thing we could do is make sure that all of those things continue to move together, and there's some coherence between all of those different things. So to me, that seems like the place to spend our energy as a full committee in these meetings over the next few months, is to continue to look at each of those things and make sure that they're talking to each other and kind of their synthesis between those different things. So that's going to be, as we're putting our committee time together, trying to find ways to make sure that these are dovetailing together both in time and content. All right, good. So with that, I want to move into just some of the reports and updates that we have. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the plan, and we've kind of had some updates around that. I don't know if you have anything else that you want to add to in plan updates.
I guess the only thing I would add is that we have this survey up. It's got a lot of traffic since it's gone up. So we've got something like 600 and some. We're pretty excited because we don't usually get that great of, we have to, so I'm still pushing it really hard. And I did bring with me some little, they're not hard backed, but I have some cards if you want to take any to give any. And I will send you all any, we're going to push today, pushing by email a bunch of this. And by social media, requested our outreach folks. It's open till February 10th, so not a long time, so another week and a half. But we just want to get as much response as we can. So that's the big thing about the plan right now.
Good. What's the response been so far? You said
600, over 600.
Over 600. Okay.
Have already participated, which is great.
Yeah, I know.
You can there's a translate button. You just hit the translate button, and it's all in whatever language you want it to be.
Okay. Great. Do you have any other CED department updates on other projects that are shaking?
I don't. I mean, I guess last month David gave a COC update, a continuum of care. The point in time count was earlier this week. They had close to 140 volunteers, which is the highest ever. And so city staff didn't have to pitch in, actually, because they just had so many people helping, which was awesome.
That's great.
So that data takes a little while to tabulate, to come out.
Any initial findings?
No, it's too soon. But yeah, I mean, staff will pull that together, and then there was even an article about when you can expect it. I think it was in the Citizen Times, but I'm not sure what that timeline is.
It should be April.
April.
Sometimes it's later though, because but yeah, we'll have the information and then submit it to them and then finalize the report. Continue with care will.
The housing, I know for reparations, the housing IFA is giving a report at the next meeting, reporting out on their recommendations. It might be a joint report with economic development, but they're continuing that work. And I can't think of anything.
That's on the
else.
February 15th meeting?
Or is it it's usually like the third Monday. I think it's February 19th. I don't have it on my calendar, but it's usually that third Monday of the month. I think.
And can you remind us on housing trust funds, so the application period closed recently?
It closed yesterday.
Okay. Have we had any applications or?
Yes. We had, make me count, 8 applications for approximately $9 million. And we only have $4 million. So,
you need
so
twice
the
as
word
much
got
money
out
in
there. We talked to a lot of folks.
Fair enough.
So, and there's like 4 of them are by local folks. Yeah. I think there are some tax credit, I haven't had a chance to even look there are probably some tax credit projects in there. Some are already awarded their tax credits, and there may be one or two that are applying for the May deadline for the, so
Okay.
it's a real mix. It's a mix of types of projects, so that's good.
What's the process and timeline for those applications?
Sure, so over the next 6 to 8 weeks, we have time to really analyze them. Any applications we have with overlap to Buncombe County, we meet with Buncombe County staff and discuss them, and we let everybody know that we do that. At the March HCD meeting, which is March, I want to say 19th, we bring kind of a summary of all the applications to council and kind of go through each project, or to the committee, sorry, go through each project, and they have a chance to ask any questions. We're not presenting staff recommendations at that point, but it's a chance for them to ask questions and for us to go back to the developer. You know, it's kind of just covering all our bases, and then we go back in April, on April 16th, with staff recommendations for vote. And then we go to the next week, we go to City Council for approval. And that's the process we used last year. Actually, last year we did it all in April. We did kind of 2 HCD meetings in council. So this year we're spreading it out a little bit more. So, and then if you're a tax credit developer, it gives you enough time to apply, which is like usually the second week of May to apply for tax credits. And,
Those are for light tech projects?
yeah, I mean, yeah, they're not all like,
Oh, okay.
the 9% deadline, the 9% tax credits are like a May deadline.
It would be great at either at our March meeting or April meeting if we could get a report of what came in. And
Sure.
we don't need to know funding awards and all that, but I'm particularly interested in, did any of the changes that we made to Housing Trust Fund policy last year or the year before affect what was able to be funded or the kind of applications that you got in? Because we've made some pretty big changes between the last 2 years revising that policy. It'd just be nice to know if that's that's having an impact or not in what we're seeing. We have, is that it? Any other questions for Sasha or Hunter on what's going on in CED?
And one other quick question. Can you remind me, so Luigi is basically on pause?
Well, it
or-
hasn't been paused yet.
Yes.
We are going to HCD. There wasn't a quorum, I think, in January. So we have February 12th will be HCD meeting. It's like a makeup meeting for January. They're meeting again the next week. And Andy's on that agenda for kind of giving an update to them on AHAC. But so February 12th, HCD for the pause request. February 13th morning at the Policy Finance HR Committee, and then February 13th at Council. So
Thank you.
it's all, yeah.
Great. We have been looking at our housing market data and voucher data on a quarterly basis, and this meeting is one of those quarters. So you saw late yesterday the housing market data land in the packet, and I was pleased to see that there actually were some homes for sale, and, which we've had months where there really hasn't been anything that landed in the below the $375,000 cutoff. I think what the reality there is that prices have stabilized only because the actual cost of the house plus the loan to purchase it continue to rise. So we're seeing those two different pieces of the home sales affordability. One is stabilizing while the other continues to rise. So the actual access to affordable homeownership hasn't really changed. But Babs, I wanted to thank you for pulling all that data and making it available to us. Any thoughts that you had when you were pulling it and looking at it, or other folks that are out there and active in the market, selling and buying homes and doing things, making loans?
I will be honest and admit that I did not do a deep dive, and I will be prepared to give a bit more of a report next time I do this. This was my first time since Barry has been the one doing it, actually going through the process of pulling the data. Yeah, so I know that he would often look at the kinds of houses, where they were located, what the state that they were in terms of it meets that price cutoff, but quality and livability, is it really accessible? Just because it's out there doesn't mean that somebody's going to want or be able to live in it. Even if they're able to purchase, renovations might be needed, et cetera, et cetera. So there's an opportunity to do a bit deeper dive, to look at the types of homes for sale. We're seeing, in this case, 27 single-family residences, and I think when we look at the combination of single-family homes, condos, and townhouses, it's 48, somewhere around there, for sale currently. So more to come next time.
Yeah. Anybody else who, Chris?
Yeah, I was just going to do two things. One, right as we were starting the meeting, Alvarez was asking me what this data was, and my description, I mean, it's not any kind of official data point, but it's something that, as I've been on this board and before I got on here, each month someone has taken the time to go through the MLS and show us what single-family homes or condos were listed for sale in Asheville. And as Babs was making reference, it's not a lot of those are of different levels and qualities, but interestingly enough, when I started on this board, we were looking at how many homes were listed at $275,000 and below, and we got to a point where we had a couple of months where there were zero, and then the search expanded to the current 375. And so, while I don't feel like there's been any problem solved, we do have a lot more quantity on there, and it's probably, and maybe even Paul can speak to that, it's probably more due to the fact that the market has slowed down for people buying new homes. It's not the chaos that we saw a year ago. But yeah, so it's really just an informal snapshot is what I would consider. It's an interesting data point, but it's not any.
Gives context.
It does give context, agreed.
And a good one to look at, I'm sorry, might be the map that shows where the homes, there is one file in here that is, that kind of shows where they are. And I will say if my Asheville area needs refinement, let me know, because I had to go in and physically select an area on which to focus. But that might be a good quick snapshot just to say, show where availability is in that price range.
And I'll just make I'll just make another quick note. So on either for Buncombe County or the Asheville MSA summary sheet, there's always a point of information that I'm always interested in. And I know, Babs, I've asked you about it before as a realtor. So it's essentially the last line under the key metrics, month supply of inventory. And my working understanding is that 6 months is considered a healthy, flexible housing market. We're at, for the county, 2.2. It moved up from 1.8, so that's maybe a promising direction.
Yeah, of course, interest rates have a whole lot to do with affordability for someone purchasing. The outlook was that we were expecting to see interest rates maybe fall throughout the year. Fed met yesterday, and maybe not so much the case. They did say that they probably not be increasing interest rates anymore, but the the market sometimes will react one way and then change their mind the next day. So we'll see what happens today. But I think the outlook is going to be that we're going to see higher interest rates for a longer period of time than what was expected over the last few months. And I think, yeah, I think that it's going to have a long-term impact. The difference of a payment for somebody at 6.5% or close to 7% for some people where we are now, and the 4.5% that Fannie Mae's targeting for when the dust settles, so to speak, yeah, is a huge difference in payment. So, but there are more programs coming around for home purchasers, 100% programs that also can be paired with down payment assistance programs. So, working on one now that's $60,000 in down payment assistance, and we've got a 100% loan, so we can increase the purchase power by that amount. So somebody who qualifies for $275 now can buy a house for $350. So, there are solves for some of this, but I don't expect interest rates to be falling anytime very soon, and I don't expect that we're going to see home values dropping either. The homes on the market that we're seeing, I don't have the data in the same way that Babs does, but I get a notification for changes in like new listings and changes in existing listings, and I'm always curious whenever I see something like under 300, or there's even one under 200, a condo on Town Mountain right now that is interesting. But yeah, a lot of them are, not you can't purchase them with a conventional loan. They're not in the condition they need to be, or the type of home is like a modified manufactured or something like that. So there's I couldn't say what percentage, but a lot of the homes on the market would not be like eligible for conventional lending.
So you're saying it's got some kind of potential fatal flaw or qualifier to it that throws it in that sense?
Yeah, exactly. There's one it's a tiny little cottage that's too small to get like an appropriate appraised value from, because there aren't any comparable solds recently enough. There's another one with also a tiny cottage, and also it's got a single wide trailer on the same parcel, which is like two different types of housing on a single parcel, which is very challenging. So yeah, there's again, I don't know what percentage of the homes on the market have some kind of flaw like that, but it is some percentage.
Right.
Any other thoughts or discussions on the sales data that was reported? I think as we think about the homeownership availability, we talked about interest rates. Obviously, we're moving into a tax reevaluation in Buncombe County, which could have impact on people's purchasing power, and the potential move to significantly increase homeowners insurance that's before the North Carolina Department of Insurance right now. All of those things together could really add to the barrier that folks have to get over to become first-time homeowners or to remain in homes that they own. So things to watch. Other headwinds beyond just cost that add to the obstacles for homeownership. We also have the data around from Housing Authority around voucher utilization.
Numbers are pretty stable and have been over the last few months in terms of available funds and leased units. I think, there's always going to be a deficit between the available vouchers and assigned and out, who's out there looking, or what we call on the street. And so, unfortunately, but we continue to work with landlords and solicit landlords to be able to accept our vouchers for our residents that want to move onto the private market. So we continue that work. Staff is busy, trying to orient ourselves this year. Of course, most of you know that we had a transition in leadership, and we are transitioning. And a part of that was our waiting list. The ladies that spoke earlier today, Buncombe County and City Schools, regarding the McKinney-Vento staff. They're right. Our waiting list did close, or our admissions closed in August, and that was an effort to stabilize our staff. Staffing, we had some staffing going on, and trying to staff up and make sure we had the capacity to meet, where we're going, and so, and also to scrub those waiting lists and to make sure we had good viable waiting list, and to move people off of those waiting lists. So the people who have been on there for years, being able to scrub those and move those who are still there and waiting up the list to be able to get them housed. We have done that. We just made a 500 applicant pool this week in order to address our tenant-based vouchers, which are what we talk about mostly, and our project-based vouchers, which are within our developments, and our tenant mobility vouchers, which somebody can take a voucher and move anywhere and use that voucher. And so we just did a 500 applicant pool, and we will be waiting for them to contact us so that we can help them get housed. And then probably in the subsequent months, once we can work through that large of a pool, we will then open up admissions again to be able to start receiving new applicants and address the ones that, of course, that what she was talking about is called a special needs voucher, and that is for youth. One of them experienced homelessness or foster care, the very thing that she was talking about. And so at that point, we'll be able to work with those applicants in order to get them housed as well. But that's where we are, and that's what these numbers indicate.
Great. Well, I appreciate everybody pulling this data together and helping us understand it. We will, if you'll set yourself a calendar reminder, we'll try to do this once a quarter, and we're looking at it monthly, and it got to be sort of the same song every time, but we'll. But it is good to kind of reground ourselves in what's happening in the market and what's happening in the rental market as well. So, so thanks to y'all, and we'll look at this again in whatever 3 months from now would be. Come on, Hunter, counting on you to so, all right. What? May. Thank you. I knew somebody would have that.
It's the fancy finger count system.
All right, y'all. Any other things that we need to discuss? Things that we want to get onto the agenda for future meetings or discussions?
Just had a quick question of curiosity. So I'm curious if, I guess from a boards and commissions rules or whatnot, are boards and commissions ever allowed to have a book club of sorts? I only ask because I'm reading a book right now that, or I've been reading it on and off. I'd be curious to share it with the board. It's actually related to an email from one of our board members earlier this week, related to basically there's a small part of it, it's the concept of universal basic income and the whole flexibility of having funding outside of things like housing vouchers and whatnot, and speaking to the guess, the fluidity and the flexibility of something like that, particularly for, the presentation that we saw earlier, where you're in a gotta have it right now or gotta have it more flexible moment. But offhand, do you know if there's any standing rule on having a book club or a discussion club of sorts? I don't, you're welcome to follow up on it.
I think the general rules apply, like,
Yeah.
Not too many of us in the same room
I
at
mean,
the same
Right,
time
I-
without
if
publicly
you,
streaming it.
if you're doing it on your own, if it's like,
Yeah.
it's like 6 or fewer, I mean,
Oh, but we can't just
I mean-
discuss committee work. We can just discuss the
Right.
book.
Right.
And then,
yeah,
then
I
we're
mean,
fine.
I would hope if you had something like that, maybe you invite some other people.
Sure.
It's not just I don't,
Yeah.
and then you don't.
Not trying to complicate things. Can I make a plug for a book right quick? It's not a paid
You can see
advertisement.
the scandal headlines now.
Yeah.
This book club really could.
Yeah.
If your book club is 7 or more, it has to be open to the public.
Okay. Well, I'll just, I guess if I may, I'll make a quick plug for a book called Fixer Upper, How to Repair America's Broken Housing Systems. It's by Jenny Schutz. She's a researcher with the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C., and there's a chapter that very specifically says, as a housing solution, give people money. So it's a interesting, I think the chapter, her wording, the chapter is called Give Poor People Money. It's basically just kind of an interesting quick take on the idea of having a quicker, more immediate source of funds. And Stuart, I think I don't know if you're itching at the mic.
I'm going to bring it up with a different terminology, which I guess is more acceptable, which is the guaranteed basic income.
Yes.
And it's something I'm very interested in, and my only real question is the rest of the committee interested in it? In considering developing a proposal to City Council, there are many other cities in our country doing this now. And there's a lot of data being gathered, actually international data as well. And it's mostly very, very positive. I know I might have mistakenly sent something out to everyone. I did my training the other day, and toward the end of it, I was like, oh no, oh no, what did I do? But I'm new to this also, so I'm still on a learning curve. But I am really, I'm not going to keep pushing it. I've pushed it in small committee.
Yeah.
But I just want to know if there's enough interest for us to consider doing something with it.
I mean, I think it's, always trying to build in, yet another flexible option. I guess it's always a question for legal or whatnot, but I think it's worthy of some conversation at some point.
Yeah, I'm interested. I won't remember what city it was. It might have been Seattle, but there was an experiment done recently, and this is why I feel like it's in our wheelhouse. They experimented with the basic income and determined that some very high percentage, something in the 90% range, people were using that money for housing. So it's like, yeah, it's that if it's being used for housing, then it definitely seems like it's in our category.
But then the second question is, are people interested in pursuing it, separate from whether it's theoretically in our wheelhouse? Because we're just people.
I think, yeah, I mean, I was intrigued reading about it. It's mentioned in this book. I guess one quick take out of here is, what's the effectiveness of doing it on a city-by-city basis or a state level versus a federal level, which is sort of a leveling effect. But I guess it's a much higher, bigger policy discussion. But I don't know, just throwing it out. And thanking you for sending out the link on that.
And there is, Jenny Schutz, I have the same book, and she's also, and I can send out if you want, like, she's also done some podcasts.
Yeah.
She's an economist, she's a housing economist. And I've wanted to actually do an internal City of Asheville book club for Shane Phillips's book.
Is that Affordable City?
Affordable City,
Yep.
because he really, it's kind of all the stuff we talk about,
Yep.
like all the displacement, it's the triad of supply, subsidy, and stabilization.
Mhm.
How do you have an effective policy that really kind of wraps around all the things.
I certainly would like to learn more about it.
Okay, so let's, maybe we can find someone who can give us some more information in kind of our opening presentation slot at a future meeting. Could even be something that we, well, I don't know if this is viable with our technology, but maybe it's somebody who can, can call in and present or something. I don't know if we have a local expert on guaranteed basic income, or, Stuart, if you felt that your knowledge was deep enough to share with everybody, we could put that on the meeting agenda in our presentation spot. And then if it feels like it's, once we know a little bit more about what we're talking about, if it feels like it's worth including into some of our work plan discussions and how we might turn it into policy, I'm open to that. Does that seem feasible?
Yeah, I don't know about me, but I would tend to think about starting with developing a small reading list, like real cogent, to the point, succinct stuff that we could wrap our heads around in terms of what's already been done, not theory, but
Right.
all the data that's out there that's already been collected.
Okay. Great.
Do you know of a local expert? Gotcha.
Just got a message, and it came a while ago, but for people to speak up into their mics.
Okay.
It's the 1 to 2 inch rule.
I have a comment that belonged an hour ago in the work plan discussion, but so I apologize for that. I remembered in reading my notes just from the Friday, the 26th, that we discussed that the occupancy tax that the TDA collects is huge, and it does a couple of things. It increases the values of real estate in the area. I believe that. I don't know that there's data that can really point to that, but I think it's pretty clear it has some impact. It also creates service jobs in tourism, and many of those people are in that 30% or more burdened category of like burned housing. So both increasing property values and also creating more need for affordable housing, and our funds aren't increasing to be able to catch up. I don't see any world where we outrun the TDA's ability to just keep throwing money at that growing problem. So I don't know the solution, but it's a big problem that we're not keeping up with.
So is that a suggestion for another, for a future meeting to invite TDA and have them discuss sort of how flexible their funds can be to support affordable housing?
Please.
Okay.
How to lift the lift funds.
Yes. Yeah, it would be interesting to see how they, they did increase their ability to fund, other, kind of community infrastructure with the lift fund this year. So we give them a chance to come back and share how that went.
Sure.
What proposals they received, what they were able to fund. Great, we can get that on for a future meeting, or at least get that request out there. Make sure you don't plan any vacations around that. All right. Anything else that y'all would like to add to future discussions, future agenda items? I will follow back up with, it sounds like sort of rebooting the Connect team around the displacement study findings, and getting that going again, and then figuring out a way for a small work group to really dig in around the plan, the findings from the community meetings and the framework that they're suggesting when they put that out to us, so that we are ready to really engage and give good feedback back to the consultants when they are next able to join us. So those are kind of our two big pieces coming out of this, and we'll try to get that out soon so that before our March meeting, those two work groups have a chance to meet together and start to develop things. Did I miss anything in terms of action items coming out of this? All right. Well, I know this was a lot of just sort of mechanics of how the committee's going to work as a discussion today, but I feel like now we've got a good roadmap for getting our work done and some good ideas about things that we want to see in future discussions. So if there isn't anything else, we will turn to public comment. So do we have anyone who would like to give public comment? Come on up.
I've been waiting to raise my hand.
I know. You've been so patient.
My name is Christine, and I am a communication specialist for the hospitality and tourism industry, and this is very relatable to the industry because plays a part in the sector within the ecosystem in a way. And so this is very much a topic that is important to me because I believe with tourism development, there's also the balance between community and inclusivity of supporting the community within tourism development. It starts here and then it goes up the chain, right? So I feel like a court dog. I have several notes, but I'm just going to hit one topic if that's okay. So it relates to the topic on hiring consultants. At what point is a consultant allocated to come in? Can someone answer?
It depends on, well, I'd rather you finish your statement.
Okay.
And then we can answer.
Okay, great. Okay, and then how does one get hired to consult? Is it for the community or does it come down through the chain of the city? Okay. What does that process look like? Are they outside of our own community consultants, possibly out of state? How much do they cost, and what are your return on investment of that consultant, and what results are you not seeing that you want to see? Does all that make sense? Do those consultants bring short-term rental knowledge to the table? If not, do you want it in terms of the balance of affordable housing and development? Cool? All right, I'm ready.
So I will speak to the in general with the affordable housing plan, and then Sasha, I know you get deeper in the weeds, but that was this group is tasked with maintaining the city's affordable housing plan. We're a representative group of city residents. We had identified the need to update our affordable housing plan. So that was agreed on by this group. We looked at how we did that and determined that we didn't have the capacity within this group as a group of volunteers or our existing city staff to get that work done, and so agreed to seek outside consultants to help us facilitate that plan. Then that was done through a competitive RFP process. So folks from this group working with city staff identified what the scope of work for those consultants would be. It was vetted again back by this whole group, and in public meetings so that they were able to, people were able to give input around what we were looking for in terms of the consultants who were going to help us drive that plan. We released that request for proposal, open, public request. We received a number of proposals. We vetted them. Again, with folks from this group working with city staff to identify and ultimately select the consultants that we contracted with. They were, one of the key things that we were looking at as we selected the firm that we worked with was their track record on doing good community engagement and making sure that folks from our community were a part of the plan discussion, and that's what you heard earlier in the meeting as we were talking about the initial community engagement work that they've done over this past weekend with another resident roundtable. So in this case, it was, I mean, it's a very open process for folks who are interested in bidding on opportunities like that for our city. The return on investment, at least in this case, has been high. We don't, this is work that, as a city, it doesn't make sense for us to retain that level of staff capacity all the time.
Yes.
We need them, we need, very specific knowledge, very specific skill sets for a very short period of time on something like this. So, so that, that makes the return on investment quite high for us, rather than having to, we can get this work done quickly and not retain the cost, in an ongoing way. We have looked at short-term rental in the course of this plan. This is a group that's working with communities across the country. Obviously, lots of places have short-term rental issues similar to what we have here in the city of Asheville. So I do feel like that's been adequately addressed in this particular case, or will be. It's certainly come up in the information gathering portion of the plan. We haven't seen what they're going to do in terms of synthesizing that data and putting it back to us. But you want to add anything?
Sure. So I guess I would say a few things. First, I think whenever the city is undertaking something like a project, we do kind of a analysis or understanding if we have the capacity in-house to do it. We often don't, because we're actually short-staffed most of the time. So that's one factor. There's different thresholds for dollar amounts. So over 30,000, that amount has to go to the city manager. Over 90,000 goes to city council for approval. Sometimes the city does very small contracts, kind of on very immediate needs that we need taken care of. I will say that for certain topics, that having a national expert that can look around the country and has experience throughout the country is really helpful. So they see the trends, they know what other communities doing, they're often aware of what's on the cutting edge that we might not be aware of, and we can do that research, but it just takes a lot of time again. So I think that's an added benefit. I think our purchasing webpage outlines all of that. That's where RFPs are posted. We have outreach lists that we reach out to make sure. We have a whole disparity study we just did around city contracting. We have procedures that we follow when we're putting something out to bid, and I won't go into all that, but we notify historically underutilized businesses or minority-owned firms, like, hey, this is out there, consider applying. So it's a whole thing.
Okay.
And I would say for short-term rentals, frankly, we don't allow them for the most part in the city. So it's not on the top 10 list because, and I don't think that's changing anytime soon. So
Can I say something?
it's up to the chair.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, and that's where I'm coming in as a communications specialist to bring that awareness to investors that are investing here. There's a balance between affordable housing and supporting the community, and then investing in a short-term rental when they're just trying to gain dollars. It's a balance, and that's what I teach and bring awareness to my clients who work with me, and I'm just asking these questions again because they're relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Great.
All right?
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Thank you all for your service. I am Lexi Aaron with Disability Partners, and I do not have a prepared statement. I just need to, as always, one, put in the back of your minds the need for universal design, because if one person who is in need of very specific things can use it, then everybody can use it. I also just want to give you a snapshot of people with disabilities. Often when we consider people with disabilities, we are thinking about a mobility disability. There are invisible disabilities as well. And people with disabilities are completely overrepresented within low income, because of fixed income, because of the way that the systems work, they can't make money even if they wanted to make money because they won't be able to produce enough, yada, 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 affordable housing. And when we are stressed about housing, this affects our disabilities. It affects your mental health. It goes into the social determinants of health, and everything starts falling down, more so than it may have already been. I am getting phone calls on the regular basis, daily, multiple times. Salvation Army doesn't have any money. Eblin doesn't exist anymore. ABCCM doesn't have any money. How am I going to pay my rent? I can't have an eviction on my... I have an eviction. I am homeless. Y'all, the picture out there, yes, the numbers reflect. The numbers are worse. So please, I'm just here to stress the urgency as you're looking at the affordable housing plan, as you're thinking about whatever it is that you have your hands in, because you're all doing multiple, you're wearing so many hats. But the big picture is it's falling down. And on a brighter note, thank you, Scott. There's actually a documentary from 2015 called Tomorrow that does a piece on what you're talking about, and there's a lot of hope in that documentary. So, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Maybe we can add a movie club to our club.
Multimedia club.
Said we could add a movie club to our book club. It's on guaranteed basic income. All right, if there's no other public comment and nothing else from the committee, we'll move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.